Hi everyone, I'm Tim. This is the Wireless Woodworker. Welcome to my shop. Today we're going to continue with our mission table build. Last time we did all the milling. This time we are going to start the joinery for the base, do the top, do some pre-finishing, and then glue everything up. Next time we're going to be doing the drawer. So without further delay, let's get started. So here we go. The arts and crafts style furniture is really known for those vertical slats that you see on the sides of all the designs. So if you are not good at cutting mortise and tenon joints, build a piece of arts and crafts or mission style furniture and you will be an expert at the end. There are almost 30 mortise and tenon joints in this little table, and I'm certainly not going to show you all of them, considering that they're pretty much cut all the same way, but I'm just going to mention a few tricks that I use. The first trick is just making it a little easier on the hand tool user, and it's to size your tenons to your mortise chisels. I only have 2 mortise chisels, and I use these 2 chisels exclusively for this table. I have a 1/4 inch and an 1/8 of an inch. So I set my marking gauge to these chisel sizes, and I use that marking gauge for all of the tenons. I didn't pay attention to the tenon 1/3 rule of the thickness of the piece or anything like that. I just used the marking gauge set to my chisel size. This makes cutting the mortises later a lot easier. And there are 1,000 ways to cut a tenon and a whole bunch of tutorials out there, so I'm not going to get into specifics of how I saw them. But one of the things I like to do is use really deep marking lines and make knife walls so that when I saw, it helps guide the saw and also gives me a nice crisp line to pare down to with the chisel at the end. So I start with the bench hook, and I saw all of the, the cross cuts, the shoulders, I guess you'd call them, and then I flip over to the vise, saw all of the rip cuts, and then I go ahead and pare down with the chisel at the end. For the small dovetail on the top rail, I just go ahead and shape that with a chisel. Don't worry too much about the saw, just because you're not going to see this joint anyway. It doesn't really matter what it looks like. It's going to be hidden behind the top. And as I was saying before, I use the same marking gauge that I use with the tenons to mark my mortises, so I know that everything's going to be consistent and that they're sized to my chisels. Again, I'm not going to go into specifics about the mortising process really. There's plenty of tutorials out there that do a better job that I could do it, but one thing I like to do is make just a few shallow chisel grooves at first, just to create a little well to help guide the chisel when I start hammering. And I'll also mention the setup real fast. So it's not really a good idea to hammer directly into the vise. So what I do is clamp a piece of scrap wood in the vise, and then I clamp my piece to that. So the workpiece is over the workbench itself, and it's held nice and tight. And then I can use that scrap piece in the vise as a vertical guide for the chisel to make sure that I'm straight vertical up and down. As I hammer across the length of the mortise, I'll leave about 1/8 of an inch or so on each side, so that when I pry out the waste, I don't bruise the ends too much. It's not such a big deal on these mortise and tenon joints because they're going to be hidden under the shoulders of the tenon, but it's just a good habit to get into. I also have a Sharpie mark on the chisel to know when I'm at the correct depth. This wears out eventually, so you have to go back and redo this. You can use blue tape too, but I just find that that sort of pulls off. And during the test fit, one of the joints was a little bit too tight, and I just took a few swipes with the block plane and it fixed that. If it was a larger tenon, I might use a shoulder plane to thin it down some, or even the rabbiting block plane, but this worked fine. Okay, and there we go for most of the joinery. I think there were 28 mortise and tenon joints total, and then the dovetail on the top rail. This should hopefully keep the front from bowing out a little bit. The tenons on the aprons did overlap a little bit, so with the block plane I just mitered the ends just a tiny bit so they didn't hit each other. Now I'm getting ready for the pre-finishing process with some smooth planing, and if you just notice that I blue taped over the glue surfaces just so no finish gets in the way of the joints. The next step is the panel joint for the top, and this is really easy to do actually for hand tool users. So if you plane both pieces at the same time, it makes this joint super simple. The edge doesn't even have to be square, it just has to be flat, because any error is going to be offset by the mirrored piece. So to check the fit, you just kind of unfold the two pieces and see how they line up. And I aim for a really slight spring to the joint that'll close up with clamps, and it should be a really nice glue line. I'm going to go ahead and glue everything up before I build the drawer, just because I want that fit to be really tight. But before I glue everything up, I'm going to pre-finish. So this finish that I'm using is a three-step finish. It's super easy. I think the recipe was from Bob Lang in Popular Woodworking a while back. The first coat is a Varathane Special Walnut stain. It is an interior stain just to darken everything. The second step is a coat of Watco Dark Walnut Danish Oil. Give it a little more depth, I guess, a little more tint. And then finally, the last step is a coat of Amber Shellac. This is just Zinsser's Amber Shellac, just to warm it up a little bit. I didn't get any glue up shots actually because it's cold enough to need to do that inside, but here's the completed base. Next time we'll go ahead and add the internal pieces and then finally do the drawer, the dovetailing of the drawer. So that's it for this time. If you like what you see, please go ahead and subscribe. You can find me all sorts of places online, Twitter at TheWirelessWW, Instagram at TheWirelessWoodworker, or you can just go straight to the website at TheWirelessWoodworker.com. Thanks for watching.